Good evening, I'm Colgan and welcome to the Business and Enterprise Show, Ireland's only live web TV business programme. A lovely hot day out today, but unfortunately we're back in the studio. No more outside broadcasts like we had this week. So we're back to the more traditional format where we have a guest who has a business and is going to tell us all about it. And tonight's guest is Paddy Donnery of Donnery Opel in Cavan. Paddy, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
As always, before we start talking about Donnery Opel, let's talk a little bit about Paddy Donnery. What's your background?
Paddy Donnery, born Cavan man. I was born and reared in Shercock. Went to school in Shercock National School and went on and done my leaving cert in Bailieborough vocational school as it was known at that time. At that time, jobs again, like much the same as we have now. Left school.
Nothing changes, does it?
Nothing changes. Left school probably about 77. Was lucky enough, got taken on a kind of an apprenticeship job working a tractor for about 6 or 8 months. And then a job came up in the local Opel dealership, which was Motorman's at the time. I applied for it through a friend of mine, and I think the boss himself said, sorry, I'm looking for someone with a wee bit more experience. So Paddy went home with his tail between his legs. And about a week later, the man came back to me again and said, maybe you are the man. Well, maybe we could work this one. So I started off in about 1978 in Patsy Lynch's, in Motorman's as it was known, filling petrol. That was my start-off job, and kind of operating what was a very small store setup with no head nor tail about it at all. So I just progressed from there. As I said, my first, I think that was 1978, £15 a week.
£15 a week. These days you're getting £15 a week, you'd be laughing.
£15 you'd be flying. So worked on that, and then as I say, I started off at Patsy at that time, and I started creating new stores department and set up a carding system, set all that up with Opel's help, and I stayed with Patsy till 1991.
And I'd say garages and forecourts back then, they would be unrecognisable compared to what they're like now.
No, at that time it was, it was just a little garage there. The petrol pumps was on the footpad, and it was a fine garage. I actually was talking to the previous owner of that yesterday. He's actually a good customer of mine, Mr. Sean Kelly from Bailieborough, and as I said, a fine gentleman. And Sean and I was just talking. Sean actually owned that garage in 1964.
Wow.
And Sean got the franchise, the Opel franchise. He was the first man to bring it to Shercock in 1966. So I didn't just go into details, but I would like to know what the price and what the wages was then. I think my £15 a week would look a lot better. But yes, you're right, the garages, there was none of these Taj Mahals or anything like that, but it was a fine building and it was very, very nice at the time. And at that time, it was lovely. Everyone done their own bits and people came into it. And there was a lot of local bits. People dealt locally, most of it anyway, you know what I mean? Like shops in little town like Shercock.
Was Opel a well-known brand back in the 70s?
Was a very well-known brand.
In the 70s, isn't there a tie-up between Opel and Vauxhall?
Vauxhall.
Their cars are very similar.
Yep.
In the 70s, would there not been more Vauxhall here in Ireland?
No, actually there was Vauxhall, but they're actually considered two different franchises at the time. Vauxhall would be more in now UK, Northern Ireland, whereas the Opel is in the south. But back then you had the old Vauxhall Vivas and Vauxhall Vectras, and Vauxhall Viceroy I think it was, but they were completely different. They weren't even shape-wise the same. The first that came in close to it was the Vauxhall Chevette. It looked a wee bit like our car in 1979. That was the closest we got to it. But there were definitely, one wouldn't talk to the other nearly. It was that, there was a big difference at that stage. But now, Vauxhall and Opel would be partly one, just different brand from the different country. UK would be known as the Vauxhall, and in the Republic of Ireland and all throughout Europe is Opel.
Yeah.
But in the 70s, Opel would have been, yes, a very big name. They would have been very big and had some nice cars at the time. Some fine big machines. So even all through the 80s.
What cars was there in the 70s?
You had the Opel Kadett.
The Opel Kadett, that's right, yeah.
The Opel Kadett, the Opel Ascona. Yeah, there was actually one, God be good to him, there's one great gentleman from Cavan here who worked with me in Shercock. His name was Pat Kelly. He would be what I would have considered one of the best salesmen I ever seen. And I was talking to Sean Kelly yesterday, I was the other man, no relation, and Pat, I remember coming back home on a Christmas Eve in about 78, and he told me he had already sold in his previous employment 7 new cars in the one day, in the 1 week, and he created a record by selling an 8th car. back in 1978.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what Pat done. But like I said,
And not unlike yourself, 78, I was only starting off on my work career as well, you know, and I know there were hard times, so to sell 8 new cars in what was effectively a country town.
A country town is what it was, yeah. But at that time...
Because when we lived in Dublin, we always knew the money was in the country.
Yeah, and the Cavan people had it. But the trend then was differently, by the way, just from the sales thing. At that time, the salesman didn't sit in the garage waiting for people to come. The salesman went out. That man actually, Pat, God be good to him, his last deal he done that day was, on his way home, back up to Shercourt to the garage, he called into the Martin Cotillo, mixed with the farmers. The farmer had the money and ended up doing a deal. That's how it done. So he called to the pair.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that was the right place to go that day.
They were proper salesmen, not order takers.
That's exactly, and a good description of it was order takers. Yeah. And that's what happened there in the late, 2006, 2007. Yeah. But as I said, like, it was still nice and it was joy, and like, it spread into me. That's all I know. Would you believe it? Even I was nearly 21 before I drove. When I went to Motorman's in 1978, I was probably around 18 or so at the time. I couldn't drive.
So can you take this to test drive? No.
No, I couldn't. I had no interest in cars. So that was just the way it was. But I learned and got my way through it, and that was it. And as I say, then I left Patsy's that was Motorman's in Shercourt in 1991, and I went on to Dundalk. And at that time when I left Patsy, I had gone from a petrol pump attendant up to a kind of operating the stores and the workshop for Patsy. So I went to Dundalk, and when I went into Dundalk, then I went in as an after-sales manager, which was responsible for parts and service. And it was only a new dealership starting up. But for some unknown reason, I suppose fate happens, the boss, I went in as a very small setup at the time, there was only myself and himself and maybe one other lad and one mechanic. The boss decided to have a bad accident and was left on his back for something like 6 months in Navan. So Paddy had to go in and take the bull by the horns and move straight into sales instead of doing my parts.
And learn how to drive.
Well, I had been driving a wee bit at that stage. But I just walked straight into the sales department, and I suppose I took to it fairly well. And we kept the business going, and it went well. And when Kieran came back out in probably 6 months later, very impressed, and offered me a job. Did I want sales or did I want the after sales, which is the parts and service? And of course, no, I went back to the after sales because I loved that part. So in 1995, I'm a Cavan man, and a Cavan man through and through. And I came to Cavan. Cavan, I heard, was coming. Opel was coming to Cavan in 1995 through Joe Gormley, who was operating called J&M Cars. And I spoke to a fella there at the time, Phelim Costa, God be good to Phelim too, another gentleman. And Phelim asked me would I have an interest there, and of course, come back home to the roots of Cavan, didn't have to be persuaded. There's a difference, and no disrespect to people in the dog. Cavan is completely different. You were saying there yourself about the country. Cavan is even still, they might say it's a big town, but it's a country area. It's still lovely. So I came to work for Joe in that. But as I said, in the meantime, I had actually, back in '88, I had married a Cavan woman. I was a Shercourt man and came the whole way to Cavan town for June Maguire.
She was worth it.
Yeah, June was well worth it. So when I got June over to Shercourt, we decided, no, we'll head back to work in Cavan. So, as I said, I have 2 children. Maria, who is doing her leaving this year, and who is big time into her Irish dancing, and that's what Maria's after.
And into the business?
No, not into the business. No, not into the business just yet. No, she's just into her Irish dancing and study at the moment. And she is hoping to get into Limerick to forward her studies with music and dancing. That's the path she is going for. Stephen, my son, who is 21 and is mad into the GAA. Stephen is doing college.
Was he mad into GAA before they start winning now?
Certainly
everyone in Cavan thinks it's great. They have a great team.
But
a couple of years ago there was nobody in Calabrefty Park.
Cavan people always follow Cavan. Win, lose or draw. Yes, we always like to go back to 47, and in recent years we did talk about 97, but Cavan people always loved the football. Win, lose or draw, we were always there, and please God, something good will come out of it this year, because they're a great bunch of lads. But as I was saying about my son Stephen loves his football, but Stephen is studying at the moment. He's done his second year there and has done reasonably well. He is studying journalism and broadcasting in college, Griffith College.
Everyone's doing journalism.
Journalism, it's such an easy job, that sort of way, so that's why he's opting for that. So, and Stephen does take a bit of a part in the business. June, as I said, is a qualified teacher, But June decided she wouldn't let me on my own to take over Opel. She couldn't just trust me, so June decided to pack in her teaching and come into the business with me. And June follows the whole accounts and keeps a very tight eye on it. So
that bought you at that stage. You bought you got your own operation up in just on the outside
Dublin Road.
Town,
yes,
on the Dublin Road. You seem to do everything there. You not only do you have the sales, but you have big parts.
We have parts department and a service department. We do all our own work. We have a very busy at the moment car wash system. And we have a valeting centre, so we can do everything there. It's all under one roof. And our after sales and parts department are busy, as I say. Yes, there's times they can be quiet and all of that, but overall we would be reasonably happy with it. Sales, I do a lot of that myself. I have a new salesman starting now in the next 2 weeks, and that's just been kept on the
ready for the big surge in
surge in July is what our aim is. And if it's the knowing what's going by, I know there's a lot of offers out there at the moment from every franchise, but there is an interest in this new system, the 132 starting off in July. People are expressing an interest in it. Whether it's, we don't know what's going to happen, so let's be part of it. Back like in 2000 when the 00 number plates, everybody wanted to have them.
Yeah.
Maybe we want to be part of this new 132, but there is a good interest in them. And there's plenty of offers out there, and that's what people are after. Value for money.
And if you're looking for a car, why pick an Opel?
Why pick an Opel? Well, of course, me here, I'm definitely not going to say anything else, only I won't clarify it as being the best, and I would say that Opel is one of the best cars on the road.
Let's take another product slogan. Probably the best. Isn't that the cars? If it's good enough for cars, it's good enough for Opel.
I suppose from my own point of view, I'm one of these people. I've left school and went straight to Opel, as I said, in 1977, 78. You calculate that yourself. I'm still working at the same brand. I've seen the good days, and let's put it like this, and anybody that tells you anything different is wrong. Every manufacturer, every franchise had their good days, had their bad days, had good products, had problem products. Everybody has them. But at the moment I see that Opel has come out with a beautiful setup. They've an Opel Corsa there, which is a fine little car. They've an Insignia, which is one of the nicest cars on the road, I would have to say. Their Astra, their new little Adam, their Market Jeep. They have a fine range of cars.
Okay, we'll go to a break now. When we come back, we'll find out more of the Opel range and more what does go on in Donnery's Motors.